The sun burned over Pine Ridge as Sarah Brennan walked the dusty path with 2 heavy water buckets cutting into her hands. At 27 years old, she already carried the weight of a whole lifetime on her shoulders. Sweat dripped down her face, her back ached, and her old boots offered almost no protection from the scorching ground. Everyone in the settlement knew her as the Brennan old maid, the woman who had passed marriage age and, in their words, didn't offer anything of value to anyone. Her parents treated her more like a servant than a daughter. Every morning before sunrise, she walked to the distant creek, fetched water, cooked, cleaned, and faced constant insults. Her mother never hid her disappointment in having a daughter she considered useless. Sarah had grown used to being ignored, dismissed, and spoken to like she didn't matter. But on that burning morning, the world shifted without warning. She stopped under a thin pine tree to rest her aching arms. Then she heard hoofbeats approaching. A man appeared on a strong bay horse, around 32 years old, with sun-worn skin and a thick beard that gave him a quiet and mysterious look. He wore simple clothes, buckskin trousers, a cotton shirt, and a wide felt hat that shielded him from the harsh light. "Morning, ma'am," he said in a deep, calm voice as he dismounted. "Can I help you with those buckets?" Sarah froze, startled by his kindness. Men rarely spoke to her kindly, much less offered help. Before she could insist she was fine, he lifted both buckets like they weighed nothing. "You don't need to trouble yourself, sir," she murmured softly, lowering her eyes out of habit. "Where are you headed?" he asked as they walked side by side. "Toward the settlement." "I live there," she said. The man introduced himself as Daniel Blackwood, the new foreman at the Thornton Ranch, the largest and most powerful property in the whole territory. Everyone knew the name Marcus Thornton. Rich, strict, feared, and rarely seen. Having a job on his ranch meant steady pay and high expectations. Daniel carried the buckets all the way to her family's small log cabin. Sarah thanked him shyly, trying to take them back. But something in the way he said her name warmed her chest in a way she hadn't felt in years. When her mother returned later that afternoon, Sarah mentioned she met the new foreman. "A man helping you?" Martha Brennan snapped. "Sarah, you already look like a desperate old maid. Don't give folks something to gossip about. A man never helps a woman without wanting something in return." But Sarah knew this was different. She had felt it. Something gentle, something real. Over the next days, Daniel seemed to appear whenever Sarah walked the trail. He helped carry her water, her basket of eggs, her bundles of firewood. He walked beside her, talking in his quiet way. For someone who had always lived in silence and humiliation, his simple kindness felt like sunlight breaking into a dark room. People noticed, and in a small settlement like Pine Ridge, noticing meant talking. "That foreman must pity her," murmured Ida Patterson as she sewed on her porch. "What man would ever want plain Sarah Brennan?" Margaret Cooper added with a smirk. Soon, gossip spread everywhere, but Daniel didn't stop meeting Sarah. He began asking about her dreams, her fears, her hopes. He listened to her like her words held weight. She learned he was intelligent, well-read, and full of ideas about improving the ranch. He never made her feel small for not knowing what he knew. Instead, he admired her strength and the quiet way she carried herself. But then, the gossip reached her mother. One sweltering afternoon, neighbors came to the Brennan cabin with eager looks, ready to spread trouble. "Martha, do you know your daughter's been seen with that foreman?" Ida said with a tone full of poison. "What are you saying?" Martha asked sharply. "It's true," Margaret added. "Everyone's talking about it." Sarah walked in carrying a basin of wet clothes and froze at their stares. Her mother's face twisted with anger. "Is this true?" Martha demanded. "He only helped me a few times." "Nothing improper," Sarah whispered. "Nothing improper? An unmarried woman meeting a man alone?" Martha's voice rose. "What kind of woman are you becoming?" "Calling him by his first name!" When Sarah tried to defend herself, her mother slapped her across the face. The sting wasn't new, but the shame burned deep. "You don't know him," Sarah cried softly. "I don't need to," Martha snapped. "A man with no past and no money wants my daughter? He must want something, and it isn't marriage." Suddenly, someone cleared his throat at the door. Everyone turned. Daniel stood there, hat in his hands, eyes steady and posture firm. He had heard enough. The room fell silent. "Afternoon, ladies," he said, his voice calm but strong. "I apologize for the intrusion, but I've come to speak with Sarah's parents about an important matter." Martha stiffened. "And what matter would that be?" Daniel looked at Sarah, noticing the red mark on her cheek. Something hardened in his eyes. "I've come to ask for your daughter's hand in marriage." Silence smashed through the room like thunder. Martha's mouth dropped open. The neighbors stared in shock. Even Sarah felt the world tilt beneath her feet. "You want to marry her?" Martha whispered. "Yes," Daniel said calmly, "if she accepts me. I have steady pay, savings, and a cabin ready on the Thornton Ranch. I promise she will always be treated with respect." Respect, a word Sarah had never been granted. Her father entered then, learning of the proposal. After hearing Daniel could provide for her, he agreed quickly. One less burden for him. "And you, Sarah?" he asked. "Do you want to marry this man?" Sarah looked at Daniel, really looked at him, this man who saw her in a way no one ever had. "Yes," she answered, her voice steady. "I will." Little did she know this marriage would change not only her life, but the entire destiny of Pine Ridge. The wedding was set for 1 month later. In Pine Ridge, the news spread faster than wildfire. Some people wished her well, but most whispered in disbelief, trying to understand how plain, unwanted Sarah Brennan had caught the attention of the new foreman from the largest ranch in the territory. Her mother searched through an old trunk and pulled out her faded wedding dress. It needed many repairs, but it was better than anything Sarah had. The seamstress, Ida Patterson, who had mocked her only weeks before, now stood measuring and pinning the dress while wearing a tight smile. Sarah felt every poke of the needle, but she stayed quiet, grateful for the help, even if it came wrapped in gossip. Meanwhile, Daniel prepared a small cabin at the back of the Thornton Ranch. It was simple but clean, with a log frame and 2 small rooms. To Sarah, who had slept in a cramped corner her whole life, it already felt like a palace. He placed wildflowers on the rough table and hung small pieces of fabric to brighten the windows. Every detail showed care. A week before the wedding, Daniel brought her a small package wrapped in cloth. "This is for you," he said softly. Inside was a thin silver ring with a small stone that shone gently in the sunlight. Sarah stared at it through blurry eyes. She had never imagined anyone would give her a ring. "It's beautiful," she whispered. The day of the wedding arrived with a bright and cloudless sky. The simple ceremony took place inside Ezra Wilson's barn, since Pine Ridge didn't have a church. The neighbors filled the space, whispering behind hands as Sarah walked down the aisle on her father's arm. For the first time in her life, she felt people looking at her not with pity, but with sharp curiosity. At the front stood Daniel, wearing his best clothing, clean and neatly pressed. When he saw her walking toward him, a soft smile spread across his face. It gave her courage she didn't know she had. The preacher spoke the traditional vows. Daniel said, "I do," with steady confidence. Sarah's voice trembled, but remained clear. And when the preacher declared them man and wife, Daniel leaned forward and gave her a gentle kiss that sent warmth rushing through her chest. The crowd clapped politely. Some smiled genuinely, others out of habit. Even Marcus Thornton, the powerful and reclusive ranch owner, surprised everyone by showing up. His presence spread a wave of shock through the barn. He rarely attended any gathering, yet here he was, sitting in the back, watching Daniel closely. After the small celebration, the couple left for their new home. The cabin glowed with lantern light as Sarah stepped inside, seeing the curtains, flowers, and neat little touches Daniel had added. It was the first place in her life that truly felt like hers. That first night was shy on both sides. They talked softly, both nervous and unsure, learning each other's quiet habits. Daniel never rushed her, never pressured her. Respect guided everything he did. Days turned into weeks, and their marriage grew through simple moments. Sarah cooked meals, tended a small garden, and washed clothes under the bright Montana sky. Daniel worked long hours on the ranch, but always came home with patience and gentle conversation. Their bond grew slowly and steadily, built on kindness and small gestures, not dramatic passion. Yet something changed 7 months later. One morning, while Sarah hung laundry outside, she noticed elegant carriages arriving at the main ranch house. People in fine clothes stepped out, something Pine Ridge almost never saw. A deep worry tightened in her stomach. Daniel came home at lunch with a heavy expression. "Something's wrong," Sarah said quietly. He nodded. "Mr. Thornton is very sick. Doctors came from Denver. It looks serious." In the days that followed, tension settled over the ranch like fog. Workers whispered in low voices. Relatives Sarah had never seen before arrived at the big house, moving around like vultures waiting for news. The atmosphere shifted, heavy and uncertain. Daniel was called to the ranch house one morning and didn't return until late evening. His face was pale, and his shoulders carried a weight she had never seen before. "What happened?" Sarah asked softly. "Mr. Thornton wants to see me again tomorrow morning," he said, avoiding her eyes. Why would the ranch owner need to speak to the foreman so urgently? She wondered. Daniel didn't answer. That night he barely slept. Sarah could feel the storm building around them. The next day he left before dawn. Hours passed. The sun crossed the sky. Sarah tried focusing on her chores, but worry chewed at her heart. Something was happening, something she could not see. When Daniel returned at dusk, he walked inside the cabin slowly. He sat at the table with his head bowed and hands trembling faintly. "Daniel," she whispered, her heart pounding. "Please tell me." He lifted his eyes, and the look in them made her breath stop. "Mr. Thornton passed away 2 hours ago." Sarah bowed her head, whispering a prayer. But she didn't understand why Daniel looked so shaken. "Before he died," Daniel said slowly, "he asked for me. The lawyers were there. They told me something he wanted me to know." Sarah felt her pulse racing. "What truth?" she whispered. Daniel reached across the table and took her hand. "Sarah, my full name is Daniel Blackwood Thornton." The room felt silent and still. "I'm Marcus Thornton's son." Sarah felt her breath catch in her throat. The simple mountain man she had married, the man everyone laughed at, was the hidden heir to the greatest fortune in the territory. And that truth was only the beginning. Sarah sat frozen in her chair, her breath shallow, her mind fighting to understand the truth she had just heard. The simple foreman she married, the quiet man who carried water buckets and helped her gather firewood, was the son of the most powerful landowner in the Montana territory. Nothing in her life had ever prepared her for something like this. "Daniel, your father was the rancher?" she whispered. Daniel nodded slowly. "My mother worked at the big house when she was young. When she became pregnant, he sent her away. She raised me alone. Before she passed, she made me promise I would find him, not for money, but for the truth." Sarah swallowed hard, trying to understand the weight of his words. "Did he accept you?" "In the last months," Daniel said softly, "yes, he apologized. He regretted what he did. He asked me to keep the truth quiet until he made things right." "And he did?" Sarah asked. Daniel's voice grew tight. "His lawyers told me he signed everything over to me. Every acre, every cattle, every building. Sarah, I'm the sole heir." Quote. The words struck her like a blow. Daniel reached across the table and held her hand gently. "Nothing has to change between us," he said. "I'm still the same man you married. I never used you. Meeting you wasn't part of any plan. Loving you was the only honest thing in all of this." Tears filled Sarah's eyes, not from fear or confusion, but from something deeper, a new understanding. A new future rising in front of her like a sunrise she never expected to see. The next week confirmed everything. Marcus Thornton's wake drew politicians, landowners, merchants, and distant relatives who arrived expecting to claim pieces of his empire. But when the lawyers announced that Daniel Thornton was the true heir, the room erupted with whispers and shocked gasps. And when the guests learned that quiet, plain Sarah Brennan was the heir's wife, the entire territory began speaking her name. Some were respectful, some were jealous, some were furious, But no one ignored her now. Daniel and Sarah moved into the massive ranch house, something she never imagined even entering. The tall ceilings, fine rugs, and polished furniture all felt unreal. That first night, lying in a bed larger than her entire sleeping space back home, Sarah whispered to Daniel, "I don't belong here." Daniel turned to her and took her hand. "You belong here more than anyone, Sarah. This house needs someone like you." In the days that followed, she proved him right. She learned everything she needed to run the home. She hired a tutor to improve her reading and math skills. She met with workers, listened to their needs, and treated them with respect. Soon, the ranch began to change. Daniel raised wages. Sarah helped build a schoolroom in one of the side buildings for workers, children. Together, they created a small clinic, better housing, and new rules that protected families. Some ranchers mocked them, saying they were spoiling the workers. But Sarah knew what it was like to be poor, overlooked, and treated like she wasn't worth anything. She refused to let others suffer the way she once had. Her influence spread fast. Women from Pine Ridge began coming to her for help and advice. Young girls who once feared becoming servants or wives without choices now found hope in her programs. Sarah created small funds to help women start sewing businesses, sell preserves, or raise chickens to earn their own money. Slowly, people stopped calling her the Brennan Old Maid. Now they called her something new. Mrs. Sarah Thornton, Lady of the Ranch, the most respected woman in Pine Ridge. Even her mother and father came to visit often, dressed in their cleanest clothes and pretending they had always believed in her. Sarah saw through it, but instead of anger, she felt something surprising: pity and forgiveness. One afternoon, Sarah found an old photo album hidden in the ranch house library. Inside were pictures of Daniel's mother, Catherine. When she showed them to him, Daniel's eyes filled with tears. "She deserved so much better," he whispered. Sarah took his hand. "Now her son is giving others the chances she never had." Quote. Daniel kissed her forehead, and for the first time, he allowed himself to feel the peace he'd chased for years. Months passed, and the ranch flourished. So did their marriage. Their quiet love grew into something strong and unbreakable. But Pine Ridge noticed something even more powerful: Sarah's heart. She never forgot where she came from. She used every bit of her new position to help others climb from the same darkness she once knew. And when people spoke her name, they didn't mention her old life. They spoke of the woman who changed everything. The woman who was laughed at for marrying a simple mountain man. The woman who turned out to be the wife of the heir to a hidden fortune. The woman who built a better life for an entire community. Sarah Brennan Thornton had become a legend,